All right, welcome everyone. Meeting number 47, March 1st, 2022. My name is Jacob Weinstock. I'm excited to lead us today, hopefully as a short distraction for other things happening, more important things happening in the world. I'll post the agenda in the chats here. Feel free to add your name, follow along. There's a code of conduct link in there. Please do check that out. We have a few topics, show and tell topics, discussions, which don't have anything filled out in the agenda. Feel free to put those, but if you just want to bring them up as we go, that's totally fine as well. Let's see, I don't see any new faces unless, I mean, I don't officially know the name of your cat there, Chris, but
got Scamper and Eclipse there.
Oh, there's two cats. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, one's a void. Yep.
Well, welcome to the meeting. All right, jumping right in. Any show and tell items? Anybody doing anything cool with Tinkerbell?
Coolest thing I've been doing is reviewing your DHCP code, so I've got nothing to show for that.
That sounds terrible.
Not really anything very cool or anything, but more like a little bit of cleanup. So
okay.
I'm about to create a couple tiny PRs for removal of, well, I shouldn't say removal, for making local registry and Nginx optional. I didn't want to quite get rid of it because I do see the merit that you guys have in your sandbox of actually having the local registry and Nginx there. Because then somebody who's just trying out Tinkerbell just for fun can, you know, just run a Docker Compose up and have everything there and not have to worry about, oh, where do I put my images? What registry do I specify? All that good stuff. But I have made it optional so that anybody running the sandbox can have additional parameters and remove registry related parameters so that they can run with a custom public or private registry that's authed or not authed, and that can take image URL that's not on Nginx. So like they don't have to have a mirror host configured. They can have a custom link for the image hosting, for the OS image hosting.
It sounds like you're downplaying like a ginormous, awesome feature here a little bit. This is something that people have wanted quite a bit. It sounds like you've got something pretty awesome here.
I don't know about that. You'll see the PRs and you're like, oh, okay, 5 lines. All right.
That's amazing. Even better that it's that way. I'm excited for that. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
Cool. Any other show and tell type items to bring up? I guess Niham did mention it briefly, but I'll just throw it out again. There's a lot of DHCP work. There's a repo called Tinkerbell/DHCP. If you are interested, please throw your name in. I will add you to all the reviews because it's not a particularly enjoyable topic to work in or a subject, but if somebody does have some interest, let me know. All right, any other topics as well outside of show and tell, any just general items to bring up?
I have a question, not necessarily a topic to discuss. I can reserve it for later Q&A type things or ask it now.
Yeah, do it.
So the hook that we currently have on the Tinkerbell repo, do we have anything documented anywhere that says what are the compatible hardwares for that, or like what are the things that that hook might not fare well on, or if we know that there are some drivers that are not by default included and definitely would have a problem on a certain hardware. Do we have any of any sense of that or anything like that documented anywhere or tested extensively at all?
Great. That's a great question. I think the unfortunate answer might be no. I don't think there's anything official. I know there's always been talks in the channel and people have maybe raised issues here and there about specific type, like network drivers or things of that nature. But that's a great document. I think that we should have. Capturing all of the stuff you just said, I think would be highly beneficial. But yeah, unfortunately, unless anybody else has any other information to the contrary, I don't think so.
I'm curious. I wonder, like, there are a few different approaches we could take, right? We could try to proactively document, here's everything that is tested and or everything that we expect to work. Alternately, we could, as a community, slowly, like at this phase, a thing I've seen on other projects was literally just a wiki page somewhere of like hardware that worked for me or hardware that didn't work for me kind of things, where people are like, hey, I had this server and this stuff worked or it didn't work. And then as we identify, like, oh, I tried it on a server and it had a Mellanox ConnectX 17 dev card that I managed to steal from Mellanox, like, and it didn't work yet because their drivers aren't public yet or whatever it is. Like, obviously, like, or ConnectX 6, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't work on Hook today. Like, the knowing that, and then maybe even opening an issue of like, hey, I'm trying to use it on this hardware and there's a PR or not, I'm sorry, an issue saying like this component didn't work. And then we can try to figure out, should we then be pulling that in or should we add that to a list of explicitly not supported? Just the other thing to point out is, so we do have Hook. There is out in the community a RGL made, I forget, was it Debian-based? A Debian-based live environment that also can run TinkWorker. And like an interesting question is, like, certainly Hook was the right thing to build at the time, but as this community matures and sees more and more participants using it in production on interesting hardware, figuring out, is that a component where we as a community want to collaborate on a robust live environment that supports lots of enterprise grade hardware, versus maybe it's more of a, we have Hook, which works in VMs and on your basic hardware that you find at home, but like, we recommend if you're going to do this in production, you should probably be building your own live environment so that you have that tool chain to be able to put in the drivers you need for your hardware, depending on like what the right approach is there. I'm not super familiar with LinuxKit and how easy or hard it is to add additional drivers. I've worked in other environments where I needed to pull in vendor drivers and I built something on top of Debian myself. So like, I find that a very interesting possible approach. So certainly I'm also open to like, I think maybe there's an interesting discussion to be had of like, what is the use case here? Is this like, as we're, as community members are moving towards production on interesting hardware, what the right approach is? That was a lot of words. I don't know if any of that was helpful.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, that is needed and would be nice to have. Like, do we approach it? Like, obviously, none of us are ever going to be able to test it on all kinds of wild west environments that are out there. So I think, yeah, it's probably, yeah, it's a tricky thing because like what we have most likely should work on most everything, but as long as it has all the default drivers and such. But how do we take the approach of, you know, someone trying something out and it not working? Do we go ahead and include it? Do we document it saying that's not there on Hook, you build your own and go for it, kind of thing?
I think
At least what we know we should start putting together, right? Sorry, go ahead.
The other thought I had is just like, potentially there are pieces of hardware with, I don't know, interesting licensing around the drivers. Like, I don't know, which Linux distros do or don't include NVIDIA drivers is always like an interesting thing. And if you're looking at the GPU space and you're looking at getting the right NVIDIA driver for and different, I've been in environments where we need this particular revision of the NVIDIA driver. So an open source project saying, oh, we ship the latest may or may not meet those needs. So I think, again, depending on different projects needs, figuring out, I think there's a good, I wonder if it's even, you could imagine making it easier for people to build their own by documenting, oh, as long as you have like systemd, here's, or I guess not even systemd, Hook does its own thing, but like, here are ways to ensure that you're like reading stuff out and then launching TinkWorker in whatever live environment you build. And like, here are examples of live environments. Here's Hook, that is the one that we ship by default, but also here's this example over there of how to do it in Debian. Maybe we can make it easier for people to build their own. I don't know. My sense is that most people who are approaching Tinkerbell, well, no, I don't know. I was going to say that most big organizations that are looking at Tinkerbell probably have some sort of live environment that they're using and probably have some notion of how it's built, but that may be a faulty assumption. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. At least the few bare metal customers that I've spoken to don't seem to have anything right now. They just want an approach. So yeah, I don't know, maybe a mix.
Yeah, and like the other like thing that occurs to me is if we were trying to like cover our bases on like approaches, I think the big one out there is, and I hesitate to say this is a good idea, but I'm going to say it out loud and we can all say that that's a terrible idea. But some open source projects include in them, like, here's the stuff you would need to build a Debian package out of it. And some of them also include like, and here's what you would need to build an RPM package out of it. And like, if you have those two, that covers like vast swaths of Linux distributions that you could then rebuild it on your own thing and then get a package you could install in some sort of live environment builder. And I mentioned the RPM-based ones because I think Amazon Linux is forked off of the RHEL CentOS RPM-based world. And that could be, I don't know if there's, I have no idea how Amazon operates, but like in theory, I could imagine Amazon having hardware that runs some variant of Amazon Linux as part of the hypervisor layer. And if so, having that in the live environment so that you're getting consistency across your pre-boot environment and your production environment. It feels like potentially a little bit of packaging within the project to make it available. Like if you've got those things and here's a systemd service file that'll just cause it to launch it, startup, is stuff that could further enable like people to build their own live environments without having to know too much about the details of launching TinkWorker.
Right, exactly. I was going to say, as far as launching the TinkWorker, I mean, that the current hook that we have literally is just starting a container and launching a process in it, and the process is as such not complicated, right? So that should be possible in pretty much any live environment, as long as you know how to build the live environment, right?
Yeah, for me, this brings up a great idea about refactoring the design, the architecture around how do I get TinkWorker running versus what is a live environment, right? Those technically have nothing to do with each other, right? I mean, they could be very composable pieces, which I think would be ideal. Like, and then my personal opinion is some kind of single live environment that the community maintains, but with the very clear understanding that like you're going to need lots of other environments, and like everyone else has already said, Puja Nehum, like, yes, here's how you build them, here's some of the things you need, but FYI, go to this other place once you're ready to get TinkWorker on, because completely different subject. And I think there's a lot of functionality that could be built in to make it nicer and easier to bootstrap TinkWorker on there, right? Like right now you have to kind of have boots give you a lot of stuff in kernel command line. And I think that's not secure. And I think it's a little too tightly coupled. I think it would be nice to think about having like an endpoint where you could, this isn't secure either, but I'll say it regardless, you could curl bash and then all of a sudden you're up and running with the Tink worker, right? And then maybe we iterate on it. But what it does give us is a decoupling, which I think would be extremely valuable. So anyways, just thoughts. Obviously there's no work or anything done around that, but I think it would be cool to decouple those for sure.
You could also imagine things like DNS records or like DNS service records of like, hey, you wake up, you do DHCP, you get an IP address, and then presumably you get a DNS server you can talk to, and you're like, hey, where's Tinkerbell on this network? Where's the Tinkerbell TCP service or UDP or whatever it is? Like those are things that we could. Again, it depends on what is the right solution for getting that information into a system. And I do think like it could be nice to get it out of the kernel command line, at least getting like things that are common across every machine within a certain DHCP subnet to not have to have all of that on the same kernel command line. Like just these are the bits that are specific to you, single server, maybe, or even again, like if those things are all obtainable from some other network service that again, you could discover via DNS, you could imagine like kernel command line is totally boring. And then a few little discovery requests to help it figure out where should it go. Which could also be nice for iterative development if you're testing on a machine that has Tink worker running and you're like, oh, the configuration is wrong. Now I have to reboot the whole machine, or do I just like fix things on the service, like the service discovery side, and then bounce Tink worker and try again?
So working with the DHCP library and Amy Toby, she's already built into Boots DHCP stuff, the ability to pass an open telemetry trace parent through DHCP so that a DHCP client could theoretically pull that out of a DHCP request, which is an interesting idea. Now we're talking message passing via DHCP, which I don't think is a long-term solution, but it is something that's already in Boots, and now you would have to have this kind of custom DHCP client that could pull this info out. But anyway, just to bring up other possible ideas, good and bad. I did want to bring up one idea. Like, I like the idea about like getting the community to contribute to like stuff Hook works on, stuff Hook doesn't work on, right? And I'm curious if like GitHub's issues is maybe a good forum, or if we want to do some sort of like, if we had just like a link to some kind of Google form that you could fill out. I don't know if that would be helpful, or something, I don't know, or just a Google Doc even, where you could just put in info. I think just collecting data from making it easy for the community to provide that data might help us just in general, and be a quick, easy start to just like gather stuff out, right?
I'm going to say something controversial, and I think it should only be opt-in, but you could imagine an opt-in version of like, hey, I woke up and my hardware worked with Hook. Like, and obviously that'll only work if your network driver does work, right? If your network driver doesn't work, we'll never get the report. But if you could, at turn up of Sandbox, opt into hardware reporting, it's a thing other open source projects do. Again, that requires infrastructure that I like figuring out how to do that in a way that is privacy respecting, et cetera. It's a big can of worms. And
right,
maybe that's why we leverage the, hey, here's how to build this on top of other live environments that you can easily go and test on your hardware. But even just a manual, you could make it an action, right? You could add to your workflow an action that says that people would have to explicitly add to their workflow that would like, hey, here's the Tinkerbell hardware reporting action that you could again, I would only suggest this as opt-in, but like if you want to help the Tinkerbell project, add this hardware reporting thing, and it'll let us know that that Tink worker was able to run a workflow on this piece of hardware, reporting whatever the interesting components we care about are.
Yeah, that's a good idea too, or an interesting idea. I think you are hit it on the head. People would probably see it as controversial. There are some interesting caveats too, right? That's under the assumption that these are routable networks, right? You have a machine that can actually get out, et cetera. So Yeah, those are some good ideas.
Full of ideas.
Any,
Some of them occasionally
yeah,
good.
anyone interested in running with any of these ideas by chance? No, no obligations or pressure, but any of the low hanging fruit seem interesting. I'll just don't feel free. You have to say anything now, but I'll just throw it out there. Please do pick this up, post it in the Slack channels for help. But this would be a great one, even if it is just like a link to some place that people can throw data or something. I don't know. Or yeah, anyways, I'll throw that out there. That'd be awesome if somebody's interested in that.
I mean, I think the easiest thing is making it, so we could easily update the hook README saying like, if you try hardware and it doesn't work, please open an issue, right? If we want those reports, which we'd have to decide, but if we want those reports, then adding that to the README of like, hey, you tried this and it didn't work on your hardware. Here's how to report, and potentially creating a template for that is something we could do without a lot of additional infrastructure. And then adding a place where people could report hardware that does work for others to see. Again, either hardware that works, even just a markdown page within GitHub of like, hey, does your machine work? Here's a link to the GitHub, edit this page, edit this markdown page thing that would auto, like you can do a lot without having someone have to go all the way to Git and still have it be checked in, although that might cause rebuild. So you may want to use a GitHub wiki, but like a place for people to report hardware that does work is also seems like low hanging fruit that we could enable people with. I'm curious, I'll bring up in Slack, hey, what do people think about, what would people want to use for contributing information about hardware that does work? And maybe even, I can try to write up a template of like hardware report of my hardware didn't work, what kind of stuff we would want.
Awesome, thank you. Appreciate that. Cool. Any other thoughts or comments, questions around that? Thanks for bringing that up, Pooja. All right, any other general topics or discussion items? Tickets, we can, floor is open. We've got 30 minutes. Feel free to throw whatever out there.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just blind here, but is there a place where we sort of document a little and explain some of the fields in the Docker Compose for the sandbox, or like even for different projects, which are all kind of put together in the sandbox Docker Compose? I'm mainly asking because there's optional fields like Aussie path that's used in the code, but it's not there in the Docker Compose that's in the sandbox in the repo currently. But it was actually a useful parameter for me, and I only found out about it from looking at the code, at the hook code, that there is something called Aussie path that I could actually set in the Docker Compose. And I'm also mainly asking because now I have a few other parameters that I've added, and some others will become optional and such. So it'll be good to kind of document to let people know what each one of those do or what can be done with them. What are some of the optional ones that they don't see but could be used? I didn't see anything. I don't know if there is plans on if we'll document any of that. I'd like to add at least some descriptions of some of these things when I submit my PRs.
Yeah, I posted in the chat, there's a doc in Tink repo that does capture like environment variables for like Tink server, Tink worker, Tink client, or Tink CLI. I don't know if that captures all of the things, and it's only Tink specific. Boots, like their front README has just some of the CLI flags, but doesn't have, and there are lots of the kind of unknown environment variables that can be set. Yeah, that's definitely a big miss, I think. That's probably about all I know in terms of, yeah, great point that Docker file it contains so much tribal knowledge. It's kind of difficult to tweak
So
it
it'd be
in any
nice
manner.
to add like that env vars md kind of file to boots as well.
I can, I'll take that as an action item. I feel like I know that code base a little bit. Okay.
I can create one with just some of the ones that I wanted to describe, and then we can add more, or
Yeah, that
however,
works.
because I'm about to create PRs for boots hook, etc.
Yeah, definitely throw them up there. I'll look for I'll look for yours and try and just tack on more when they come up. That'd be awesome. Thanks.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I dropped the ball on. I wanted to do last quarter what was I calling it? Not some sort of a docs event. I had a cooler name, but I forget it now. But anyways, yeah, I apologize. I dropped the ball. This would have been something very useful for that. Hopefully, next quarter I'll get something together and we could do the docs-a-thon or whatever I had. I had a better name than that, I promise.
Could there be a cool name to incentivize developers to document? I'd like to know about that one.
Yeah, I had grand plans that I failed miserably, but yeah, I wanted to get swag together and everything, and hopefully entice a lot of people to come out and get involved. But yeah, it didn't happen. So it's on my Q2. It's on my Q2 list.
We're all always behind on docs.
Yeah.
Always, always.
Cool. Awesome. Any other topics to bring up? Questions? Oh, I had one. Anybody have an experience with the sandbox behind a proxy or in a kind of isolated environment? There's been one person that's put out some tickets, some issues, asking for help, at least one, I think maybe even two. I've not tried that. Has anybody here on this call by chance done anything behind a proxy or behind firewalls or anything like that? No. Okay. That's fair.
So what does that mean exactly? Only the image pools will be affected, right? Are you saying that Boots is also not in the same network, or are we talking about like setting up DHCP relays and stuff like that, or like what would
Yeah.
be affected if the
Could also
sandbox was-
DNS. If you're setting up a brand new sandbox network that doesn't have
Okay.
internet access, I don't think anything in the sandbox provides DNS explicitly. I don't even know what do we give out for DNS in our DHCP responses.
That's a
Do we
great
give out-
question.
Probably
do we give
just-
anything out? Do we give out 8.8.8.8.8? Like that's like
Yeah, okay.
easiest to default to assume is just like, oh yeah, just go to the internet and ask for DNS. And like, yeah, you could imagine beefing up the sandbox to include a DNS server and tweaking the Boots config to give out its own IP for DNS. Again, it's adding more stuff. Ideally make it optional kind of thing. Like, please use DNS causes it to give out its local IP for DNS. Otherwise it, whatever. But even then, like, you'd wanna figuring out how to like, then I guess, depending, I'm not super familiar with all the magic behind Docker Compose getting the names working in between containers. But in theory, if that information could feed into a like, I think it actually does write to the hosts file. So theoretically, like a properly configured DNS mask might be able to read from that host file, and it but then it's going to use the wrong IPs. It's going to use the internal IPs. I have no idea how you would, it would be a pain in the butt. But in theory, you might be able to get it to give out its own IP address for everything. Like, hey, you wanted a host record, you asked for
Yeah, that's how you
DNS or
have
something. Hi, I'm
Docker
here.
configure,
I do things, and just like assume that all records should point to the host that the sandbox is on. But like, it's still gross. But that my guess is DNS is probably the place where they're failing. It's always DNS.
That's helpful. I will take that back to that ticket. Thank you. Because I think just to add a little bit more color, I think they were setting on the host they were setting proxy environment variables, but still running into challenges, which makes sense because I don't think proxy environment variables will do anything for DNS if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, yeah.
Or if it's a host record, if it's a name as opposed to an IP, then yes. But oh, right. Even if they're using an IP, but if they're trying to then use the proxy to get other stuff, it means they still need to do DNS.
Because we use like, I mean,
Oh, but if it's a proxy, then maybe if they're trying to reach through a proxy to the internet, then all they need is
Yeah.
valid internet facing DNS, and then the requests to the proxy might then work.
Yeah, there's two things, right? So not the provisioning machine, right? This is like the provisioner itself. They're just trying to Docker compose up, right?
Oh, and
That's failing for them. They're having, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't glance through all the logs they sent, but they set some of those, and so
is there a ticket or is it in Slack?
yeah.
You can send me. I'll also see if anything immediately jumps out.
Okay, thank you. I'll put it in the chat here and also in the meeting notes. Yeah.
Yeah, come.
Cool. All right, any other questions, topics? All right. Just a quick reminder, next week, same time, triage party will be going on if you're interested. Always a good time to learn more about different repos and stuff going on. And to, I mean, no reason we can't use that time if you do to join to create tickets too. I think we answer a lot of tickets, but no reason why you can't just come and create tickets. So yeah, if you're seeing this in the future, every other Tuesday, triage party. And with that, if there's no other further things, thanks y'all for showing up. Have a great week, and we'll see you online. Take care.